We're going to get started tonight. I'm Jay Height here with Shepherd Community and our virtual gatherings. We appreciate again those who helped sponsor tonight at Properties, Bose McKinney Law Firm, Servant HR, Oak Street Health, and CareSource. And so they help make these evening gatherings possible. And I'm excited to have a new friend, not a new friend to many folks here in Indianapolis. Fred Glass, we're thankful for you being with us tonight as we are talking about one of the key issues facing our community, being hunger. You're a lifelong Hoosier, lifelong folks, grew up here in Indianapolis, I think on the north side.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, and I was told this week by a friend of yours, I got to go to the library and get your book.
Oh, yeah.
But you have quite the trek to Gleaners. You served at this little school down south called Indiana University as the athletic director most recently, and came back in law practice. But you've served in offices in politics, in government, and we're just glad that you're with us tonight. We're thankful you fill big shoes in John Elliott.
I know that for sure.
So just tell folks tonight, as we talk about hunger, what does Gleaners do?
So, well, first, Reverend, thanks for having me on your program and here with your guests. I'm honored to be here with you, and I'm also honored to be here, more broadly speaking, as the new CEO of Gleaners. You're right. I'm filling huge shoes with John Elliott. I'm inheriting an organization that is in really, really good shape. But after I left IU, I was practicing law and looking for a side opportunity to give back and be involved in human services. And someone said, well, would you, in fact, as a mutual friend of ours, I think Rob Smith at Lilly Endowment said, would you consider a full-time gig? And I said, for the right thing. And there was a lot of openings in the not-for-profit world. None of them were really lit my fire, as it were. But when they said Gleaners, then I was like, bingo, I'm all in, because it's feeding the hungry, right? Reverend, it's we're not called to do that many things. We're called to feed the hungry, clothe the naked, welcome the stranger, visit the prisoner, visit the sick. And I'd argue that hunger may be one of the most fundamental things. So I tell you that long, circuitous story because essentially what Gleaners is all about is feeding the hungry. And we're, as you know, but some of your guests and listeners may not, we're a food bank. So we essentially supply food pantries that are on the front line, like Shepherd Community Center, which is one of our great partners for the last 20 plus years, or since 2011, I think. And they're not your grandma's food pantries. When I was a kid growing up at St. Thomas, there was a little old lady that was open when she wanted to be and had cans of green beans and boxes of macaroni and cheese. And we're able, as a food bank, to source produce, protein, dairy, healthy dry goods, get them to great partners like you on the front lines, where you guys, through home delivery, your drive-through pantry, the mobile pantry you host, can get them to the people in need. So the food bank is an apt description, because we take sort of deposits from people that can get us food, our generous partners, and then we give it out to people who need it.
Yeah, I think something interesting for folks to understand is that Gleaners is having to purchase a lot of food these days to make sure that places like Shepherd have it. And we appreciate your leadership, but inflation is a disproportionate tax on the poor. And we're seeing it. We all see it when we go to the grocery store, right? It's just so much more difficult for our neighbors and difficult on places like Gleaners. And as you said, Fred, you have been a critical, Gleaners has been a critical partner with Shepherd Community and what we're doing. We have another guest tonight, Brandon Brown, and he's going to join us. And then I'll have him talking a little bit. But it is, if we want to move kids educationally, they have got to be eating. good nutrition matters in education. And so this isn't something that we have 6 different focus areas. Last night we talked about health, we talked about loneliness, and tonight we're talking about hunger and we're talking about education. And these first 3 are a foundation that lays the groundwork for academic success. And we're going to hear from Brandon about that in just a little bit. Um, Fred, tell me, what's the biggest challenge that our neighbors are facing as it relates to food security?
Reverend, I think you put your finger right on it. It's costs, right? I'd say there's 2 things. The first one is cost. Inflation does disproportionately tax the poor. Everything those of us with more means feel, the poor feels harder. And then I don't know if you consider other economic conditions, but rent increases in Marion County, I think, are up 15% across the board. And a lot of these are out-of-state landlords, maximizing what they can charge the poor that don't have many alternatives than some of these apartments. So it's a real whammy. And some of your listeners may be surprised to know. I mean, most of these folks have 1 or 2 jobs. They're working poor, and they're barely making it, and then they get forced into awful decisions. Do I pay my rent so my family doesn't get thrown out, or do I eat? Do I buy my medicine, or do I skip some meals? And so, like you said, it's all interwoven. But the costs are disproportionately hurting our neighbors, and then access. Transportation is so key. I think people, take for granted have the mobility of having a car, even having bus access, to do all the things that our neighbors have to do to get along. Just in transportation is a real push, and that's one of the reasons it's awesome that Shepherd's a great partner on a home delivery system to try to find people literally where they live. I was at a pantry the other day as part of my onboarding. I wanted to visit all 21 counties. I think the first pantry I visited was yours with Andrew and Jason. But I was in a pantry in Franklin, and this car, a family full of kids, they ran out of gas in line, and the kids were mortified, and the line was all messed up. And the volunteer pantry manager said, that's not an unusual thing. And my dad, who I think I told you, Reverend, had a bar down on Skid Row, used to always say to me, Fred, poor people have poor ways, and they're just trying to get by. And they're that close to have enough gas to get through that pantry line, and sometimes they don't quite make it. So I would say costs and access, most dominated by transportation, are the biggest challenges for our neighbors to get nutritious food.
Yeah, in our partnership with Gleaners, Gleaners helped us bump out the back of our building, so we have more storage, and that we're build shelves and have a forklift that helps us. We are doing twice a month now drive-through distributions with Gleaners. We did it every week during the summer, and your team has retooled and said, let's figure out how we keep it going. We do deliver to about 150, 160 homes each week. My wife and I have had the privilege to do that, and we've become good friends with some of our neighbors, and we've heard those things that you talk about, the choices. So I can buy the 10 cents ramen noodles instead of the 12 cents because I get one more package out of the dollar. It's just those types of things, and we send food packs home with our kids in every weekend. And our regular pantry, where we get most of our food from Gleaners and then other community partners who do food drives for us on Saturdays, we're up about 75 families, about 240, I think, through the drive-through. We're seeing a lot of folks who need food, and those numbers are continuing to go up. I appreciate also, we have some partners who, like at fall break, we sent kids home to eat. And Brandon will probably talk a little bit more about how those breaks, it's important for us to take care of those kids during those times. And so we send home food packs. I like to think, granola bars and fruit. And I think Pop-Tarts are healthy. There's a reason why my doctor says that I need to cut back on the calories. But Pop-Tarts, if you think about them, they're like the whole food pyramid. You've got strawberry, and that's a fruit, and then you got the crust is a grain, and then the frosting is dairy. So it's like the whole food pyramid. I think in those little silver package, there's some health there, but my doctor disagrees. But we want to get good food, and that's one of the things that I want to tell folks. Gleaners is doing a great job helping us, because I've delivered for 2 years these boxes from them. We're getting healthy, fresh produce into homes where parents can get those things in. Health, nutrition are the foundation. Why does Gleaner partner with Shepherd?
Well, because you're a trusted partner. I'd say two things. One, you're a trusted partner, and let me feather that out a little bit for your audience. This last summer, we had a heat wave, and we just couldn't have our neighbors stand in line at the mobile pantry that Shepherd was hosting in its parking lot. And we weren't sure what to do. And we reached out to you and your team and said, what do you think? What other alternatives? Is there any way we could go inside? And you're a busy operation. That's not a small request. And it wasn't like, well, let's think about it. It's like, yeah, the answer is yes, we'll figure it out. And we were able to get our neighbors in and our volunteers inside, avoided canceling pantries that people depend on, and really carried that on through the summer. That only happens if there's trust between organizations. So I'd say the number one thing is you are a trusted partner, and we hope we are to you. But the other thing I think is that I think Shepherd's is really a model for not only feeding the hungry, but attacking hunger, right? It's an old saying that you can't beat hunger just by feeding the hungry. Yeah. That's the necessary start. We need to feed the people in need. Gleaners is really good at sourcing and delivering nutritious food, but we don't do the wraparound services. We don't do the things that really attack hunger, and you do. School programs, after school programs, mother and infant information. The list sort of goes, on and on. And that's why I'm so proud for Gleaners to be a partner of Shepherd, because not only are you doing all these things with your food pantry, home delivery, and so forth, but more importantly, you're providing the wraparound services that attack the underlying causes of hunger.
Well, Mario Marino says the great organizations are those that tackle issues bigger than themselves and partner with others to accomplish it. Mm-hmm. And Gleaners is part of that. We'll hear a little bit here how the Mind Trust are partners with us, because these issues are bigger than all of us. And we have to weave this tapestry together that presents a wonderful picture of what a true community can be. And so tell us, Fred, as you look into 2023, what are the challenges facing us, and what are the things that our listeners might want to be involved with that could help bring about solutions for those challenges?
Yeah, Reverend, I've got to tell you, I've got a mix of trepidation and hope as I look into 2023. My trepidation arises from the need is increasing. I mean, you just need to look out your window. We are 50% higher in terms of our distributions from earlier this year. We're 85% of where we were at pandemic levels. Think about that. I mean, we are basically at pandemic levels when this was a lot more on people's minds than it is now, this need. And it keeps getting higher at a time, as you alluded to, our costs of acquiring food are going up. So we have generous partners that donate food, but increasingly we try to fill the need by buying food, by sourcing food, and it's more expensive for us. And the government, unfortunately, the pandemic programs that provided more protein, more produce and the rest are sunsetting. So we've got a little bit this storm of increased need, higher costs, and we Gleaners are trying to fill the gap through our generous donors, as well as being very efficient and having an operation that can take bulk food that might otherwise go in a landfill or go unused and process it so we can deliver it to pantries like yours. So that's the trepidation part. I see that storm coming. It's probably kind of storming a little bit now, but I think between raising consciousness with our donors to step up again like they stepped up in the pandemic, and being a great partner as a food bank and efficiently getting food supply to you folks on the front line, I think we can weather that storm. My hope is arising from, I think this is increasingly getting the national attention that it needs. The White House hosted the first conference on hunger since Nixon did it in 1972. A lot of positive things are coming out of that, including a follow-on conference that I attended in Washington, D.C. At the USDA. The Secretary of Agriculture was there. The Secretary of Health and Human Services was there. We were one of only 5 food banks out of 371 food banks in the country to be represented, which I think is a tribute to my predecessor, John Elliott, who carved out such a shadow in the national anti-hunger effort. And they're bringing everybody to the table. Healthcare folks, anti-hunger folks, wraparound services people. So I have some optimism that there'll be an integrated national attack on hunger that we haven't seen as strong in years past. So I leave with an optimistic view of 2023, even though we have some challenges.
Yeah, I'm optimistic because people are responding. And if folks want to help out, I highly recommend Gleaners as a great partner. If you want to come and help us when we do our food distributions with Gleaners, you can contact Shepherd and talk to our volunteer department, Donna Alexander. Great partnership. Fred, we're glad that you're here back in the city and helping serve where you have served in so many roles and now leading this effort. I'm going to go over to my friend Brandon Brown. Brandon leads the Mind Trust. Mm-hmm. And we've had lots, just like with Gleaners, lots of intersections into the life of the Mind Trust. Brandon, for our viewers, tell us, what is the Mind Trust?
Yes, we were founded in 2006 with a mission to ensure that all kids in our city have access to a great education. And I've spent now 16 years raising resources and, really working to build an education system that is going to provide all kids in our city with access to a great school. So we've launched well over 43 schools at this point, have launched, I think, 12 or 13 new nonprofits in the city, and have the pleasure of working with, great organizations like Shepherd to make sure that this work is not just changing the education ecosystem, but is being driven by local communities, and is being responsive to what our kids really need.
Yeah. You have pushed me in many of our conversations. You had said, you've got to fight for quality educational seats for every kid in the Near East Side. And so Shepherd's trying to live up to that. What are the challenges that a student today in Indianapolis is facing?
The reality is that a student today, so if you're a student of color, if you're a Black student in particular, you are generally redlined into a low-performing school. Your proficiency rate is likely to be about 3%. And we have an education system that is not responsive to the needs that you have as an individual and the needs of your community. And the reality is that the education system wasn't actually created to serve all kids well. And you are at an incredible disadvantage. COVID exacerbated existing inequities that have been true in the system for a long time. So we had a lot of challenges in 2019. If you look at 2022, many of the educational disparities have been greatly exacerbated. And it's going to take a community effort to make sure that we are meeting the needs of every single kid who, already faced really insurmountable odds a few years ago. And, many of those odds have been exacerbated. And the reality is that we can't go back to a system that we had before COVID. We have to reimagine what a new education system is really going to look like. And that has to be driven by local communities.
Shepherd embeds employees in IPS School 58, where we operate services for the families there, as well as an after-school program. inside of Harshman, inside of Arsenal Tech, inside of Purdue Polytech, as well as operating our own elementary school. Uh, we're trying to answer that call. Why did the Mind Trust choose Shepherd as one of their partners?
So, if we're being honest with the Mind Trust, we made a lot of mistakes. We, felt like we had great ideas, and we felt like if those ideas would only be embraced by our community, then we could see real change. And the reality is that to see sustainable change, changes in the education system have to be locally driven, specifically by the people that are most impacted. And we had a lot of missteps in our early years. We, didn't necessarily have the trust that we needed in our communities to drive real change. So we've tried to reorient ourselves away from coming up with great ideas and then trying to sell the community on those ideas, and moving towards a system where we are working with, great organizations like Shepherd that have their ear to the ground and actually represent our community. And then we need to be responsive to what we're hearing. And then we need to, really make sure that we're supporting a community-driven vision for educational change. And when I look across the country, and specifically in Indy, there are not a lot of organizations that have the capacity that you do. And the reality is that you run a school. So you see every day what the educational challenges are, and you've put your money where your mouth is. So when we think about what are the local community anchors that we need to work with to drive real change for our communities, Shepherd is number one on the list, because you have your ear to the ground. You are working, hand in glove with many folks in your community, and you're actually running a school. So you have the, kind of on the ground knowledge that is very rare in much of the education reform work across the country. And we need to be an organization that is being responsive to your needs, not coming up with new ideas and then trying to engage you on those ideas in the front end.
Yeah, one of the things I want to compliment you and your team, COVID did make worse so many challenges, but the Mind Trust pivoted and brought to us services in the summer where our kids could have half a day of educational classes. Now, they weren't all lining up going, yes, that's how I want to spend my summer. But we could incorporate, and you even helped us in year 2 in changing that so we could keep fun in the summer. And we're seeing great progress in those kids, and their reading scores improve, their math scores. We want to do better at that. I am doing a listening session recently with one of my board members and a couple staff members, and we were listening to the parents, and the parents thanked us for our summer program, normally a 7-week program. And the Mind Trust and I think the United Way provided funding for us to be able to impact educational wise during the summer so that we don't have the learning loss that is so prevalent. So thank you for that huge investment into our students. We want quality educational seats in every school in our neighborhood. And so it means we have to engage with parents, and things happen. And our team in our school, 4107 East Washington, do a great job, but we want to help make that possible at School 58 and at the middle school and at the high schools. And we have lots of schools in our neighborhood, and they are all partners because we want our kids to succeed. What's it going to take to see dramatic impact in the next 3 to 5 years?
I think it'll take a few things. One is we have to have an unyielding belief in our children that every kid, regardless of their race, their income, or their circumstance, can achieve at high levels. The reality is that adults are usually the problem. It's not the kids. And if we hold high expectations for all kids, chances are they're going to meet our expectations. So I think it actually starts with the mindsets that adults in the education system have for what our kids can accomplish. And I think what we've learned during COVID is that schools and communities are too disconnected. From 7 to 3, schools are kind of on an island. And we have amazing community assets across Indianapolis that need to be more embedded into the K-12 educational process, which is why I think what you're doing at Shepherd is so revolutionary, because you are not thinking about what can you do for the community separate from K-12 education, but you're thinking about how can we, really complement and infuse the work that you're doing every day in your neighborhood in order to, ensure that kids are getting a high quality K-12 education. And I would say finally that we need to move away from a one size fits all education system where we have, one school district that does one thing for very diverse neighborhoods across the city. And we need a system where we're thinking about what are the needs in a neighborhood and what are the resources that we can bring to bear to make sure that we are cultivating solutions that are specific to what the individual needs are in our community. Because what you need on the Near East Side may not be what a school needs on the West Side. And we have to have an education system that is responsive to specific needs of really diverse communities. And that's why I'm so excited about IPS, right? So there's a lot of work to do in IPS, but it is one school system that has said, look, what we're doing is not working. And we're going to, move forward in this new, kind of uncharted new territory. And it's really exciting because, I think we have a school district that is acknowledging for the first time that what we have historically done has not served kids well. And we're willing to try new things, and we're willing to partner with communities in new and creative ways. And I think Shepherd is at the vanguard of many of those new partnerships.
Well, I appreciate the kind words, and the volunteers at Shepherd and the staff all make that possible. But these partnerships give us the resources and helps us access other things that helps benefit our kids, and so they win, and we appreciate that. I think as we look, people can come in, and if they'd like and read with a kid, we need volunteers who want to read with kids. We opened in the shared system with the Indianapolis-Marion County Public Library, a library there in our school, in our building, and every one of our families got a library card. And I guarantee you that Brandon Brown and Fred Glass, when you were a kid, were in the library with your library card, and it took us to places. I was there. It took us to places, and our imagination grew big. And I saw what the Lord of the Rings looked like before there was ever a movie, and we want those same opportunities. I want my kids to be able to read so they can go to places in their imagination. And we've opened our new STEM lab, and they won't let me go in there. They're afraid I'll probably break something. But we got the 3D printers and the Glowforge and all these little things that I could get myself hurt at. But our kids are loving it, and we want to keep working hard. As you come into Shepherd, there's a wall. It says to graduation and beyond, and pictures of kids who come through our programs. And there's one who graduated med school at a little school called Harvard. He probably couldn't get into IU, so he had to go somewhere else and went up on the East Coast. But I see those kids, and I know their stories, and they're the stories because multiple people invested in them and said they matter. And that's the community. That's where we all come together, making sure that kids have food to eat and they have quality education. That's what tonight's about. And we appreciate Brandon Brown, Mind Trust, Fred Glass, Gleaners. Appreciate you both being with us tonight. And we'll be back next week where we'll be talking about housing and about jobs and our efforts in that. Again, these things build on each other. It's not random. If a kid has a good breakfast, if they've eaten a good meal the night before, they're going to do dramatically better in school. And as Brandon said, in Indianapolis, is there enough food? Yes, but not everyone has access to it. Is there great education in Indianapolis? Yes, but not every kid has access to that. We want to be those bridge builders, building access to that, and working with our partners like Gleaners and Mind Trust. Thank you, and we look forward to seeing you again next week. We thank our sponsors for making it possible. Again, Fred, thank you. Brandon, thank you. It's a privilege to serve alongside you in helping making make Indianapolis a great place to live, work, and worship. Thanks.